So this is the Daf for April 27th, 2025. We're in Makkot 19. So here we are. I'll back up the end of 18. We're in the middle of a statement. It says, Rabba Bar Ada says that Rabbi Yitzchak says with regard to first fruits, now we're in 19, from when is a non-priest who eats first fruits liable to receive death at the hand of heaven for their consumption? One is liable from when the fruits will enter inside the temple. The Gemara notes, in accordance with whose opinion is this halacha stated? Is it in accordance with the opinion of this Tana, as it is taught in Braita that Rabbi Eliezer says with regard to first fruits, some of which are outside and some of which are inside the temple, the halakhic status of those that are outside the temple is like that of non-sacred produce for all matters concerning them, and the halakhic status of those that are inside the temple is like that of consecrated produce for all matters concerning them. Rav Sheshet says, with regard to first fruits, the lack of placement alongside the altar invalidates them, while the lack of recitation of the accompanying Torah verses does not invalidate them. The Gemara notes, in accordance with whose opinion is this halacha stated? It is in accordance with the opinion of this Tana, Rabbi Yishmael, as it is taught in Braita that Rabbi Yoshi says three statements in the name of three elders, and one of those statements is that which Rabbi Yishmael says, one might have thought that a person would bring second tithe produce up to Jerusalem in the present after the destruction of the temple and eat it. And ostensibly, it could be derived by means of a logical inference that one may not do so. A firstborn offering requires bringing it to the place to Jerusalem and eating it there, and the second tithe produce requires bringing it to the place just as the firstborn offering may be eaten there only in the presence of the temple, so too second tithe produce may be eaten there only in the presence of the temple. So Rabbi Yishmael continues and counters what is notable about a firstborn. Bringing the firstborn to Jerusalem is required only in the presence of the temple, because it is notable in that it requires placement of its blood and its sacrificial portions upon the altar. Will you say that the same with regard to second tithe produce, which requires only that it be consumed in Jerusalem? He then suggests, first fruits will prove that placement of blood upon the altar is not a factor, as they do not require placement of blood upon the altar, and yet they are brought to Jerusalem only in the presence of the temple. Rabbi Yishmael counters, what is notable about first fruits? They are notable in that they require placement alongside the altar. Perhaps, since second tithe produce does not require placement at all, even in the present one must bring it to Jerusalem and eat it there. Rabbi Yishmael concludes, therefore, the verse states, and ye shall eat before the Lord your God, the tithe of your grain and the firstborn of your herd and your flock. Deuteronomy 14:23. The Torah juxtaposes second tithe produce to the firstborn, just as the firstborn may be eaten there only in the presence of the temple, so too second tithe produce may be eaten there only in the presence of the temple. The Gemara explains, the proof of Rav Sheshet's opinion from the Braita is that if it is so that the lack of recitation of the Torah verses invalidates the ritual of first fruits, let the Braita refute the derivation by saying what is notable about the first fruits. They are notable and they require recitation of the Torah verses and placement alongside the altar. Rav Ashi said, there is no proof from the fact that recitation is not mentioned. Although the lack of recitation does not invalidate the first fruits, there is no mitzvah. Everyone agrees that there is a mitzvah to recite the Torah verses, and therefore let the Tana say that there is a mitzvah to recite the portion, and refute the proof from the first fruits in that manner. As in the case of the second tithe, there is no mitzvah to recite Torah verses. Rather, Rav Ashi said that there is a different reason that recitation was omitted from the refutation. It is that there is the case of the first fruits of a convert who needs to recite, quote, I have come to the land that the Lord swore unto I have come to the land that the Lord swore unto our fathers, Deuteronomy 26, verse 3. And since he cannot say it, as the Lord did not swear to give the land to the ancestors of the convert, he brings the first fruits but does not read the portion. Therefore, the obligation to recite the Torah verses is not clear-cut for the Tana, and he did not mention it. The Gemara asks, why was it necessary for the Tana to derive that second tithe produce is not brought to Jerusalem at present from the juxtaposition in the verse? And let the derivation revert to its starting point and derive the halacha through an analogy derived from the common factor of the first fruits in the firstborn. Each of the sources neutralizes the significance of the notable factor in the other, leaving the common factor. One must bring them to Jerusalem. From there it may be derived that second tithe produce, which one must also bring to Jerusalem, need not be brought there when the temple is not standing. The Gemara answers, the juxtaposition is necessary due to the fact that this analogy can be refuted. What is notable about the common factor is that true of both second tithe and firstborn, it is notable in that they have an aspect involving the altar, which is not so in the case of second tithe. The Gemara asks, what opinion does Rabbi Yishmael hold that led to his initial assumption that one is obligated to bring a firstborn animal to Jerusalem only when the temple is standing? If he maintains in general that the initial consecration of the temple sanctified Jerusalem for its time and sanctified Jerusalem forever, and the location of the temple remains sacred even after the temple was destroyed, then one should also be obligated to bring a firstborn animal to the place of the temple and sacrifice it on the altar and eat it. If he maintains that the initial consecration of the temple sanctified Jerusalem for its time, but did not sanctify Jerusalem forever, then he should raise a dilemma even with regard to a firstborn, whether it may be eaten in Jerusalem. Ravina said, actually, Rabbi Yishmael maintains that the initial consecration of the temple sanctified Jerusalem for its time, but did not sanctify Jerusalem forever. And why is it obvious to him that the firstborn is not eaten? It is because here he is stating the halacha with regard to the case of a firstborn whose blood was sprinkled before the destruction of the temple, and the temple was then destroyed. Its flesh is still intact. And based on a juxtaposition, you shall sprinkle their blood upon the altar, and their flesh shall be for you. Numbers 18, 17 to 18. We compare the status of its flesh to the status of its blood. Just as its blood must be sprinkled at a time when the altar is standing, so too its flesh may be eaten only at a time when the altar is standing. And he compares the status of second tithe produce to the status of a firstborn offering and derives that one may partake of second tithe produce in Jerusalem only when the temple is standing. The Gemara asks, and does a matter derived via juxtaposition then teach another matter via juxtaposition? The principle with regard to the halachot of consecrated matters is that a halacha derived via one of the hermeneutic principles cannot serve as the basis for derivation of another halacha. Each halacha requires its own source. The Gemara answers, second tithe of grain is non-sacred produce, and halachot of non-sacred matters derived via hermeneutic principles may serve as the basis for deriving other halachot using hermeneutical principles. The Gemara asks, this works out well according to the one who says, in determining whether a derivation involves consecrated matters or whether it involves non-sacred matters, we follow the matter that is derived from a matter derived from juxtaposition. Since, in this case, the matter derived is second tithe produce, which for these purposes is non-sacred, its halakhic status may be derived from juxtaposition with the halachot of sacrificial matters. But according to the one who says we follow the matter that teaches, that is, from which the halakha is derived, what is there to say? The status of the second tithe produce may not be derived by means of juxtaposition from the status of the firstborn offering, which itself was derived from the blood of the offering, because the firstborn offering is a sacrificial matter. Gemara answers, this is not a matter derived from a matter derived from a juxtaposition, as the status of the firstborn offering is not derived from the status of blood. Blood and flesh are one matter. There is only one derivation in this case, which is that status of the second tithe produce is derived from the status of the blood and the flesh of the firstborn. The Mishnah teaches that one who ate offerings of the most sacred order outside of the temple courtyard and one who ate second tithe produce outside the wall of Jerusalem is flogged with 40 lashes. The Gemara asks, didn't we already learn this one time in the previous Mishnah, 13a, that one who ate second tithe produce or sacrificial food that was not redeemed is flogged? Why does the Tana repeat the halacha of the second tithe produce in this Mishnah? Rabbi Yoshi Bar Hanina said, these are different cases. The latter case, this Mishnah, is in the case of ritually pure second tithe produce and a ritually pure person who eats it outside of the wall of Jerusalem. The first case, the previous Mishnah, is in the case of ritually pure second tithe produce and a ritually pure person who eats it within Jerusalem. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive that one is liable to receive lashes due to impurity? It is derived as it is taught in the Braita that Rabbi Shimon says that the verse in the portion of the declaration of tithes, quote, I have not put any of it away when impure, Deuteronomy 26 verse 14, is a general formulation that is interpreted to mean whether I am impure and the second tithe produce is ritually pure, or whether I am ritually pure and the second tithe produce is impure. Rabbi Shimon adds, and I do not know where it is that one is warned, that is, where there is a prohibition with regard to eating. Although it is clear from the verse cited that it is prohibited for one to partake of second tithe produce while impure, the source for this prohibition is unclear. Before citing the source of the prohibition, the Gemara asks, with regard to one with impurity of the body who partakes of second tithe produce, it is explicitly written, quote, a soul that touches it shall be impure until evening and shall not eat of the consecrated food. Leviticus 22, verse 6. Which the sages interpret to include second tithe produce. This is a prohibition with regard to ritually impure person partaking of second tithe produce. But when Rabbi Shimon says, I do not know where it is that one is warned with regard to eating, he is stating, with regard to the impurity of the second tithe produce itself, from where is the warning derived? The Gemara answers, it is derived, as it is written, with regard to second tithe produce, you may not eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your wine, or of your oil, Deuteronomy 12:17. And later, with regard to blemished firstborn animal, the verse states, within your gates you may eat it, the impure and the pure may eat it alike, Deuteronomy 15:22. It is taught in a Braita of the school of Rabbi Yishmael, even a ritually pure person with a ritually impure person may eat, even a ritually pure person and a ritually impure person may eat of the flesh of a blemished firstborn animal in one dish and need not be concerned, as there is no prohibition for one to eat it while he is impure or while it is impure. And the merciful one says, it is that impure flesh of the blemished firstborn that is permitted for you to eat with a ritually pure person within your gates there, whereas here, in the case of the second tithe produce in Jerusalem, you may not eat it within your gates, in the matter that one eats the flesh of the firstborn. The Gemara stated that the case of second tithe produce that was not redeemed, cited in the previous Mishnah, is referring to second tithe produce that is impure. This indicates that impure second tithe produce can be redeemed. The Gemara asks, and from where do we derive that impure second tithe produce is subject to redemption? It is as Rabbi Elazar says, from where is it derived with regard to second tithe produce that became pure, that one may redeem it even in Jerusalem? It is derived, as the verse states, because you are unable to carry it, as the place is too far for you, and you shall turn it into money. Deuteronomy 14, 24-25. And the word seset, meaning to carry it, or se'eto, so se'et, means nothing other than eating, as it is stated, quote, in portions, masot, were taken to them from before him, Genesis 43:34, referring to gifts of food. Therefore, the phrase, you are unable, or se'eto, means you cannot eat it, referring to a case where it is impure. The Torah states that in that case, one may redeem the produce even if it is in Jerusalem, not at a distance. The Gemara cites another unrelated interpretation. Rav Bavli says that Rav Asi says, from where is it derived with regard to ritually pure second tithe produce that one may redeem it even if it is one stride outside the wall of Jerusalem? Contrary to the plain meaning of the verse, quote, as the place is too far from you. It is derived, as it is stated, because you are unable to carry it, se'eto, indicating that if there is any reason that one is unable to carry the produce and bring it to Jerusalem, he may redeem it regardless of its distance from Jerusalem. The Gemara objects that verse is necessary to derive the halacha of Rabbi Elazar that one may redeem impure second tithe produce even in Jerusalem. The Gemara answers, if so, that the verse is required to derive only the halacha of Rabbi Elazar, then let the verse state explicitly, quote, you are unable to eat it. What is the reason that the verse employs the term se'eto? The Gemara objects and say that the term comes entirely for this purpose, to teach that one may redeem the produce, even if it is not far from the city, and nothing is derived with regard to impure produce. The Gemara answers, if so, let the verse state, you are unable to take it. Why does the verse employ the term se'eto? Conclude two conclusions from it. One may redeem ritually pure second tithe produce even if it is just outside the walls of Jerusalem, and one may redeem ritually impure second tithe produce even in Jerusalem. In connection to the discussion of where one may redeem second tithe produce, the Gemara relates Rav Hanina and Rav Hoshaya sat and a dilemma was raised before them. If the second tithe produce is at the entrance of Jerusalem, what is the halacha? Can one redeem it there? The Gemara elaborates, it is obvious in a case where one is outside of Jerusalem and his burden of second tithe produce is inside Jerusalem, the tithe is admitted by the walls of Jerusalem and its status is that of produce that entered the city. But in a case where one is inside Jerusalem and his burden of second tithe produce is outside Jerusalem, what is the halacha? A certain elder taught them a baraita of the school of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. It is written, quote, as the place is too far from you, Deuteronomy 14:24. The term mim mecha, too far from you, is interpreted as from your fullness. Mim mil luacha, indicating that the person in all his apportences, including the burden he bears, if any part of him or his apportences is inside the city, it is as though he is entirely inside the city. Therefore, he may not redeem the second tithe produce. Okay, Rav Papa raises a related dilemma. If one is holding the second tithe produce on a reed and is suspended behind him, what is the halacha? Since he is carrying the burden, does it fall into the category of his fullness, and it is no different from a burden that he bears on a person? Or does its status differ because it is not actually resting on his body? The Gemara concludes the dilemma shall stand unresolved. Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Yochanan says with regard to second tithe produce, from where is one liable to receive lashes for eating it outside the walls of Jerusalem? It is from when the produce entered within the wall of Jerusalem. What is the reason for this? It is derived, as the verse states, with regard to second tithe produce, quote, before the Lord your God you shall eat it, Deuteronomy 12:18. And it is written in the previous verse, quote, and you may not eat within your gates, Deuteronomy 12:17, from which it is derived. Anywhere that we read concerning it, quote, before the Lord your God you shall eat it, we read concerning it the prohibition, quote, you may not eat within your gates. That is, it may not be eaten outside of the walls of Jerusalem. And anywhere that we do not read concerning it, before the Lord your God you shall eat it, as the produce remained outside the walls, we do not read concerning it the prohibition, you may not eat within your gates. The Gemara raises an objection from that which Rabbi Yoshi says with regard to a priest, that a fig of untithed produce came into his possession, and he seeks to separate terumot and tithes from it. He says, this fig, I designate its teruma at its stem, I designate its first tithe at its north side, and I designate its second tithe at its south side. And it is a year when second tithe is separated. That is the first, second, fourth, or fifth years of the sabbatical year cycle. He is in Jerusalem when he recited this formula. Or he says that poor man's tithe shall be designated from its south side if it is a year of poor man's tithe. That is the third or sixth years of the sabbatical year cycle. And he is located anywhere in the outlying areas, not in Jerusalem. In those cases, if he ate the fig, and I'll continue, this is the end of 19, but I'll continue into 20 for this thought. He is flogged with one set of lashes. Okay, thanks for watching.